Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host, and we're back with another interview, this time about the youth movement around climate change. You know, the climate crisis affects all of us, but it's youth and their children and those children's children who face the worst impacts in their lifetime from climate change. If we don't address climate change now, the planet's carrying capacity for human life, along with that of many other species, will collapse, leaving us in a battle amongst ourselves for survival. And that is not a future that we can leave to our children or their children. We're talking today with Lindy and Lynn Odhiambo of Zero Hour Media about their No Youth, No Truth project, a multi-generational effort to raise the profile of underrepresented youth and low-income communities suffering the brunt of climate and environmental disasters. You can get involved too at noyouthnotruth.org. That's No Youth, No Truth, all one word, .org. Now, the project is seeking to create a much wider dialogue and integrate youth's perspective into the climate change and climate policy debate. And they're training young spokespeople to connect with media to address climate policy issues and counter misinformation. Welcome to the show, Lindy and Lynn. How are you today?
Hi, it's great to be here, Mitch.
Well,
thank you so much for having us.
Well, first, can you explain your roles in the Zero Hour Project and No Youth, No Truth Project and what you're trying to accomplish? Starting with you.
I joined Zero Hour as an ambassador in 2020 in the volunteer management department. And then in September of 2020, I applied to join press, and I ended up getting in and joining in February of 2021.
And what's your background? Where do you come from?
I'm from Tucson, Arizona, just below Phoenix.
And are you college age? What's your?
No, I'm actually only 14.
Wow. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. Congratulations on getting involved. And Lynn, how about you? Tell us about yourself.
I was also an ambassador in the beginning of January 2020. And then later in May, I got involved with the global outreach team on Zero Hour, which basically means that I reach out to chapters that we have all around the world. Mm-hmm. And then later in November, we had a big proposal season where, everyone on the team was pitching projects we would have for Zero Hour as the organization would move forward. Around the same time, my friend Bon Michael, who was director of Zero Hour Philippines, the chapter over there, they were experiencing some really bad typhoons, and he was frustrated because lots of people were struggling to literally stay alive, and he was frustrated because he wasn't getting enough media coverage of the issue. So that gave me the idea to have this campaign and really push for more international coverage of climate disasters. That's how I got involved with Zero Hour Press Team.
And you live in Kentucky. May I ask how old you are and when you got involved?
Yes, I live in Kentucky. I started out when I was a high school junior, and now I'm about to go into college, so I'm 18.
Great. So tell us about the No Youth, No Truth Coalition. What communities are you seeking to gain additional representation for?
So the goal of No Youth, No Truth is to challenge misinformation about the climate crisis and climate policies, and to encourage climate storytelling and prioritize science in the media regarding the climate crisis. Mm-hmm. And we want to create and build bridges and working relationships between journalists and media representatives with frontline youth who are willing and able to share their stories and their experiences with the climate crisis in the press and in the media. So, we're going to be holding media trainings and things like that to help prepare youth to work with journalists and vice versa eventually.
And Lynn, what kinds of communities are we talking about?
Well, we definitely want to center women, LGBTQ plus women, LGBTQ plus people, people of color, people who have been colonized, indigenous people,
And so when folks get involved in the project, what do they experience? I know you're doing a series of trainings over the next couple of weeks. Tell us about those. What do you come away with if you participate?
Our trainings cover teaching people how to pitch a story to a media location, like how to get an article in your local journal, in your local newspaper, how to strategize around, constructing your narrative, how to stay in the public view.
So let's talk about the impact that climate change is having on those communities, low income, underrepresented, people of color, LGBTQ plus. How is climate change particularly impacting them?
In general, when people are disproportionately less supported by the government and by different policies, they are then, as a result, less likely to survive the climate crisis or thrive in our world that is now kind of slowly dissolving as we know it, right? And there are a lot of statistics showing that underrepresented communities, especially youth of color, LGBTQ youth, etc., disabled youth, and the elderly are less likely to survive climate disasters and be able to access food, jobs, stable income, housing, etc. during the climate crisis.
So how would you guys suggest that we start to recalibrate the project of bringing people into the debate about climate change? You're describing people, for instance, who are stuck in low-lying land that are severely impacted when there's a hurricane. The tidal rise will wash out their homes, and the wealthy who are up on the hills do not experience that. How do we bring all of those people into dialogue? What's No Youth, No Truth's strategy in terms of doing that?
I think that these people are already speaking to us. We just need to be there to listen to what they're saying and amplify their stories so they don't go forgotten.
Okay, so for instance, I'm a journalist.
Right.
At least I do this part of my day, to be perfectly clear. Could you give me an example of a story that would help people understand as they read Earth911 how this particular community that we're talking about, and you can choose any example, is impacted by climate change?
I think that climate stories and climate storytelling, which is something we're definitely putting a big emphasis on because it is very effective in grasping people's attention and using that pool of emotion and empathy with others, for like a people not polluters view of the world, to show the media what real people are going through in their daily lives. And there are plenty of activists who are definitely willing to share those stories with the world, given the opportunity. And that's what we're trying to do with this coalition, this project.
So that suggests, for instance, that your participants will share their personal stories. Are you encouraging them to take photos of things that are going on in their community and post that to share with journalists?
Honestly, we are preparing to help these youth share anything they are comfortable with and, provide their opinion and their words and their wisdom on anything that they feel is important. Lynn, I think you had a really good point about the media and seeing a media in the news and how that affects the public's view of like what is important. Did you want to share that with Mitch? Because I feel like that would really be helpful in this discussion to like.
Yeah, I was talking to Lindy the other day about how, what we see in the news. We see something in the news and we know, okay, that's important because the news is covering it. So if we don't see these stories in the news, that signals that these people's livelihoods, their homes, their futures are not important. And I think it's unacceptable to say that these people are not important.
So let me share an example. Media Matters, which is a media accountability organization, recently reported that Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' 4-minute visit to space a few weeks ago got more attention on the network TV morning shows, CBS, ABC, and NBC, than all climate change coverage those shows had done over the entire previous year. How does that make you feel? And what can we do to communicate to those morning shows that the climate crisis and the individual impact on people is more important than how Jeff Bezos spends his vacation?
It makes me really frustrated, Mitch. Like, I think that if enough youth mobilize, if we have like massive numbers of young people speaking out about the climate crisis, then like it'll reach a tipping point where like, the media can't ignore our actions. For example, in 2019, there was a big international climate strike. Do you remember that, Lindy?
Yes, I do, although I did not take part in it.
Yeah,
and Earth911 covered it.
Right, because, there's plenty of strikes happening across the world. People were getting together and really drawing attention to it in that critical moment. So I think if we continue to organize and like focus our energy together as youth, then the media will have to pay attention to us.
So what are the key policies that No Youth, No Truth is focused on as you look at, for instance, the public policy debate, like the Green New Deal? What are the most important investments that society can make together to try to ameliorate what's going on and make it better?
I know that 0 Hour has done a lot of work with the Green New Deal, but as of right now, No Youth, No Truth doesn't have any policies that we're publicly or privately at the moment behind, just because if, we have many partners, and as a campaign and a coalition, it would definitely be a priority to discuss anything that we want to sponsor outwardly with the group and make sure that everybody is on board with that, right? So right now we are just focusing on providing support for youth right now.
When I was in junior high school back in the 1970s, which is, we should have been talking about climate change then, I was on the Title IX committee, which was the first federal legislation that required equal treatment of men and women, or women, girls and boys in junior high, in sports. And it was the first committee in our community to have those conversations. And in order for me to participate in that conversation, I had to learn a lot about the policy, the Title IX policy, in order to talk with the school principals and administrators that I was sitting around a table with. As you all sit down and talk about for instance, the Green New Deal, how do you all prepare yourselves for that conversation? Do you have team members who are trying to digest it and make it easier for everybody else to understand so they can keep up on it and focus on their own stories in addition to talking about that policy?
I know that last year we had a training series, 0 Hour had a training series called Getting to the Roots of the Green New Deal. So like we teamed up with the policy team and the volunteer management team to create a training to orient, like to get young people well versed in talking about the Green New Deal in a way that isn't, just like the mainstream conversation about, it's climate change isn't real, we shouldn't be worrying about that. No, we're already here. We know climate change is real, and right. We need to talk about solutions.
For sure. I agree with Lynn. We do have, in 0 Hour, we do have a policy team that works very hard to keep everybody updated and make sure that 0 Hour is up to date and following everything. But, as individuals, it can definitely be difficult, and I can see where you're going with this. It can be difficult to, follow everything as somebody who's not even old enough to vote yet. I can speak and say that it takes work and to learn about these things and to understand them and to, keep up to date with all of that.
Well, I certainly want to encourage you to recognize that it is not just voting, but it's speaking up. And I'm sure you recognize that. It makes the biggest difference in society. And so let me ask a question, because, often the older folks will take kids' opinions for granted. But what we need to build is a multi-generational effort. And I'm speaking as an older person, and I have grown children, that has already made a lot of changes in my own life, trying to reduce my footprint, and I'm far from perfect. And I want to partner with everyone on the planet to develop a response to the climate crisis. How do we move past what is often presented in the media, and maybe it is simply a misrepresentation by the media, of a generational conflict that is evolving around climate change? How do we bring everybody together? Do you guys talk about and think about how to solve that problem?
I know we had some of our partners joined us, our adult partners joined us in a working call earlier this week. Remember, Lindy?
Yeah.
And they gave us some really good feedback on the trainings we were working on. They have more experience working with media than we do. So we as youth have a lot to learn from working with adults. At the same time, young people bring a lot of creativity and energy to the scene. So I think there are people who are willing to work together, and we can start from there.
What was some of that feedback? I'm curious.
Well, they did tell us that in our interview, you might take cuts, or in podcast interviews, that they would take cuts of what we'd say, and not everything would be, continuous, which I did not know, and I don't know if anybody else knew that either. And I did want to add on to what Lynn said. One of the reasons that I guess that contention maybe exists that you were talking about, that generational contention, is just that sometimes youth don't necessarily feel comfortable in adult organizing spaces. It can feel a little bit condescending, or that there's not really being a space made. And adult organizers do tend to have more resources, or even get paid for their jobs, whereas we are volunteers and we don't get paid, but it's our entire future that the movement holds, right? So I think moving past that contention, you're right, it is very important. And to do that, we definitely need to understand where it comes from in the first place, and how we can, get past that.
Well, first off, let me tell you that we're not going to take anything we say out of context here. That the whole conversation will be podcast or broadcast on the podcast. But the other thing I want to share with you, having been both a youth organizer, because I was politically active when I was a kid, and now, is that adults still feel that same nervousness that you're describing too, that they don't have the same standing as everybody else in the room. It's always a matter of opening the dialogue enough that everybody can find the place that they can get their footing to have the conversation or participate in the conversation. And so, I hope you guys will feel free to reach out to Earth911 at any time to talk about these stories, and we welcome it. How can our listeners, particularly younger people, get involved? And where do you suggest they start their engagement to learn more about Zero Hour and about No Youth, No Truth?
Well, you can sign up to be an ambassador, like me and Lindy started out as. You can go to the Zero Hour website. This is zerohour.org, and find the link to apply to be an ambassador. It's really quick and easy.
What does it mean to be an ambassador?
Well, as somebody who's in trained ambassadors, I know that the program is a little bit dormant right now, but I know there are many active ambassadors out in the world, and we're working on getting that program more front and center for our org. But ambassadors usually go out into their community and begin spreading the word and doing their own work and locally, right? And the goal is to get ambassadors to become chapters and connect with other ambassadors in your area, which we do have chapters internationally, which is really cool.
And how many people are involved in the movement worldwide? Do you have a sense of that right now?
I don't have a number off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's a good thing to know, because I do not know. But I do know that it is very big.
And the important thing is it's growing, and I've been watching, and you guys are doing a great job. So I want to thank both of you, Lindy and Lynn, for joining us to talk about this on Earth911.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so grateful for you giving us this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your platform with us.
We've been talking with Lindy Feaster and Lynn Odhiambo of the Zero Hour Media Group about the No Youth, No Truth project. You can check that out at noyouthnotruth.org or check out zerohour.org to find out about the umbrella organization and everything this worldwide movement of youth is doing. Take a few minutes, too, to share this podcast. These kids are working hard to change their world and change our world for the better. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, and let's get people talking about all of these issues. You know, if we take our time to collaborate now, we can really change the future. This is Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we're going to be back with another interview soon. But in the meantime, please take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.